Doing well. Today we're learning today's daf. We're learning daf. What is it? We're nun aleph. Wait a second. Where are we? Ah,
We're currently on nun Amud.
don't confuse me, David. Don't confuse me. So we're on nun amud beis. We'll be learning daf nun aleph. That's correct. We are doing about a blot and a half, and then on Shabbos we're going to pound. We're going to do almost 2 blotim Mir Hashem. Daf Yomi is at 6:10 on Shabbos. It's a little bit earlier than it should be by about 10 minutes, just so I can get to a shiur that my brother is giving, Leilu Nishmas, my other brother. So that will be after the 7:25 mincha at Kin. So we'll just be a drop early at 6:10. Here we go. We're 1/3 of the way down on Daf Nun Amud Beis, and we're speaking about some of the restrictions of when you're not allowed to make a chazaka, or maybe I should say not able to make a chazaka. And on that note, the Gemara tells us, "V'lo leish chazaka b'nichsei ishto." A man is not allowed to make a chazak in his wife's properties. But this goes in the face of a statement of Rav, because ve'amar Rav, eshes ish tzricha limchos. So hold on. If the Mishnah says that a man cannot make a chazak in his wife's property, then why does she have to be mocha? That doesn't make any sense. It says the Gemara, well, let's analyze this. Biman, who does she have to be mocha for? Ilema be'acher, if you want to say that the macha has to be for other people, non-husbands, everybody other than husbands, that can't be, because Amarav, ein machzikin b'nichse eshes ish. There is no chazaka. A man cannot be machzik in the property of another man's wife. That doesn't work. It says the Gemara, that can't be what Rav meant when he said that eshes ish tzricha limchos elolav bebal. It must be that we're talking about the husband. And if that's true, then we have a problem. We have a stira between our Mishnah and Rav. Our Mishnah seems to say, our Mishnah says, and therefore that implies that a husband cannot make a chazaka, no matter what she says or doesn't say, whether or not she makes a macha. And Rav says an eshes ish does have to make a macha. So,
It's not talking about a stallion.
no, the Mishnah is talking about a husband and a wife dynamic. That's for sure. We were trying to figure out what Rav meant. When Rav said she has to make a macha, what was he talking about? Was it talking about acherim? Let's say I tried to make a chazaka on another man's wife's property. So Rav says you need to make a macha in that case. Well, that was what we were trying to figure out. Is that what it means? Or no, it's talking about benichsei. It's only talking about benichsei bal, elalav bebal. So therefore we have a real stira between Rav, meaning you're asking what was the havamina of trying to understand Rav that way. So the Gemara was trying to get out of this question. They're just trying to wriggle out. It's not a great question. It's not a great havamina, but it was at least an iteration.
Which is the lesser.
Yeah, which is the lesser, correct. Although the Gemara does make an effort to remove the question, which is itself interesting. Okay, so then answer number 1, the Gemara says halfway down, Amar Rav la'olam bibal. Yes, we are talking about the husband who's making a kinyan, or trying to make a chazaka. The Mishnah says, no dice. There's no way that this chazaka will ever work. What did Rav mean? The husband goes into the property with a digger. He's sitting there. He's shoveling down, and we were afraid that might make a kinyan because he's making a change to the property, whatever the lumdus is. There, Rav says you need to make a macha. But regular squatting, you don't need to make a macha. That's one distinction. Says the Gemara, how can you say that? Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravua. Ein chazaka l'nizakin. There are no chazakas for nizakin. So therefore, if there's no chazaka, why is she making a macha? The Gemara says, Ema, ein din chazaka l'nizakin. He says, no, it's the opposite. We thought ein chazaka l'nizakin means that when there are damages, that you never have to worry about a chazaka being made. We're saying the opposite. Ein din chazaka l'nizakin in a kuladik way. What does that mean? If someone is damaging my field and I say nothing, by definition, they own the property now. There's no 3-year chazaka, it's over. Because if I walk into your property and I start digging up your backyard and you say nothing, I don't have to wait 3 years, I own it right away. Another possibility is lav itmar Allah, that perhaps what we're talking about when we say that no macha is required in our Mishnah, that was what our Mishnah said. That's if he's doing something severe in the field, like creating a lot of smoke, or if it's a very bad smell from an outhouse. In those cases, she doesn't have to make a macha. But in a typical case where a husband's trying to become a squatter, she does have to make a macha. Very, very different ways to understand our Mishnah. Rav Yosef Amar, I disagree with how we understood the line of Rav. Le'olam be'acher. He says, really, we are talking about a man who is not the husband trying to be the squatter. Uchegon, what's the case? She'achla miktsas chazaka b'chai habal. The case is where the squatter utilized the property of the father for a little bit during his life, and then v'shalosh la'achar misasaba, and then the husband died, and then he still squatted for 3 years. And under those circumstances, she would need to make a macha in order for that kinyan to not take place. We'll soon see that Rav even agrees with Rav Yosef on that one. And what's the svara as to why this should work? Again, the man was squatting just before the husband died and for 3 years after the husband died. So says the Gemara, Migudi boy Amar Le, it really should be Amar La, that he could have said to her the following svara. What could he have said? Ana zvinta minach. He could have made the claim, I bought it from you. Ki amar leinami at zvinta le, that you sold it to your husband. V'zavda nihale, and I bought it from him. All of these svaras are migus. They could have gotten away with this claim, and therefore we believe him under these circumstances if he squats for 3 years after having spent just a little bit of time in the Baal's property before he died. So all of this is sugya number 1, trying to figure out how Rav's comment of Ein Machzikin Benichse Eshes Ish fits with our Mishnah. We gave answer number 1 that it's talking about the Baal, and the Baal was damaging the property. We gave answer number 2 that it's not talking about the Baal, it's talking about Acher, talking about other people, and he has a migu. Gufa, let's analyze this line of Rav a little bit more. Gufa, bottom line of Nunamid based. Amar Rav, Ein Machzikin Benichse Eshes Ish. Rav says that there is no Chazaka benichse eshes ish. Right. So Rav had said that we don't make a chazaka by eshes ish by an acher. So let's analyze this. Says the Gemara, turning to the top of Nun Aleph Amud Aleph, the Daine Gola, the Baalei Din, the people who were the Dayanim in the Gola, the Rashbam on the top of the page, first one, Dibra Hamaschel v'Daine Gola, Shmuel the Karna. And according to some Tefusim, the Rashash writes that it doesn't even say Shmuel. Karna was an Amora, seemingly. And he and Shmuel, or maybe just he, was one of the Dayanim of the Gola, and they argued with the din of Rav. Rav says that a man cannot make a chazaka in another man's wife's. I can't make a chazaka on one of my wife's friends. I can't do that. That doesn't work. But the Dayan of Gola said, no, a chazaka is a chazaka. If you're squatting, you're squatting. You can't break halachas. In the meantime, yichud, whatever side issues come up, that's not the point. You can make a chazaka, no problem at all. Omar Rav, look at this. We just said that Rav holds ein machzikin. The Dayan Gola hold machzikin. And look what the Gemara says. Omar Rav halacha kedayan Gola. So that's not how machlokos work, right? Rav says X, the Dayan Gola say Y, and then Rav says, be paskin not like me. So asks the Gemara right away. Amru le Rav Kahana v'Ravasi l'Rav hadar be mar mishmaise. Did you change your shita? So look at this answer. Amar lehu mistabra amra kid Rav Yosef. Rav, who historically died before Rav Yosef did, or Rav Yosef was a tiny little child when Rav died. They were 2 generations apart. Rav was the earliest of Amoraim, and he lived in the 220s. Rav Yosef probably lived around the year 300, and Rav was already an adult in 220 when Rebbe died. So he says, "Mistabra Amre Kid Rav Yosef." It must be that when Rav is saying that when I say that I hold like the Dayan Gola, they were talking about a case like Rav Yosef. Now the Gemara doesn't bother to articulate historically accurately what's going on. What he meant to say is not Rav Yosef, but the case that Rav Yosef was talking about. Rav Yosef wasn't alive yet, and Rav knew all of Torah, but Rav had never heard of Rav Yosef because he wasn't born yet. So it just means that Rav agrees in the case of Rav Yosef. What was the case of Rav Yosef? That's the case at the bottom of Nun Amud Beis. When the machzik was in the property right before the Baal died, then the Baal died and he squatted for 3 years. Under those circumstances, that is where we see that. Sorry, I just made a mistake here. That is where we see that that Rav would agree to that shita. Very good. And then the Gemara says 4 lines down on the top of Nun Aleph that a woman cannot make a kinyan, a chazak on her husband's property. So says the Gemara, yeah, pshita, kevan deis le mizone, because she has access to the mizonos. So why would we ever think she could make a chazaka mizona hu dekachla? What she's consuming in the field is not her being a squatter. What she's consuming in the field is her halachic rights from her ksuba that her husband owes her mizonos. What's the problem? So I don't even understand the Mishnah. Why do we have to say that a woman can't make a chazak? Of course she can't. Says the Gemara, you're right. Typically, that is the case. However, lo tzricha yiche la'ara achrisim lemizona. There's an isolated field that he completely separated from his properties in order to feed her. He's not even taking care of the field. Just goodbye. This is your field. Go eat. Right. Then the Gemara says haraya. If she can then bring a raya, then yesh. The Gemara says if she's able to bring a raya that she now owns that field. And Allah she owns that field. And says the Gemara, well, why would we say that? Lema, perhaps we should argue that the only reason why the husband would ever sell his wife this field is ligluye zuze hu debai. The Rishonim here explain that perhaps the husband knew that she was skimming a little bit off the top, and really she now owes him a little bit of money, and he created this little chap of pretending to sell the field, and she's gonna pay him for the field in order to even out his costs. So maybe that's what's going on, but that's obviously not what the Gemara says. The Gemara doesn't say it's not a sale. The Gemara says haraya yesh. So we clearly don't say ligluye zuzihu debai that we're talking about a case where the husband recognized she was skimming and he just created this scenario in order to recollect some of his losses from her skimming. So shamas mina, what we learn from here, 8-9 lines down, by virtue of the fact that we don't say that haraya doesn't work, we say haraya yesh. That shows us hamocher sadel ishto kansa, that if a husband sells a field to his wife, she's taka konet, no ruse. And we don't say, says the Gemara, that there's a svara that he's just trying to recollect from the skimming. Says the Gemara, lo, that's actually not correct. This whole thing is incorrect because your diuk is incorrect. The diuk that you made from the Gemara was haraya yesh, that if in fact she had a proof that she owns this property, then yesh, then she gets to keep it. Says the Gemara, no. Haraya, if there is a raya, then yesh shtar b'matana. That's only true if there's a shtar matana, but it's not true about a mecher that she can buy that field. We don't assume she could buy that field. And here the Gemara gets into a lengthy dialogue about a woman buying a field from her husband. A third of the way down, a quarter of the way down on Nun Aleph Amid Aleph. Amar le Rav Nachman Rav Huna. Lo hava mar gaban be'urta. You, Rabbi, Rav Nachman says to Rav Huna, you were not with us last night, bitchuma, in the tchum. What does it mean, bitchuma? Take a look at the Rashbam. About 2/5 of the way down, right next to the word kasav, where the Gemara starts with the word kasav and the first word on the line, just to the right. Bitchuma. Why? What is the word bitchuma? Bate midrashas shalahen besof hatchum hayu, kedei sheyuchlu lavo sham b'shabes min ha'ayaros shemisaviv. The Beis Medrash was located at the fringe of the community, all the way at the outside. So we know how Tchum Shabbos works. If my Gemara is a Tchum, then you can go up to 2,000 amos beyond. And they would do that because imagine a Venn diagram. My Tchum goes like this. Your Tchum overlaps. What happened? Venn diagrams? Okay. So basically it made it more accessible to people if it was positioned just right at the end of the Tchum. Anyways, the Gemara says that Rav Nachman says to Rav Huna, you ditched Beis Medrash last night, and when we were in the Beis Medrash, to Amrina and Mili Mal Yasa, we learned some gorgeous Torah, and you missed it. Rav Huna was jealous. Amar Lei, my Mili Mal Yasa Amrisu, tell me what sweet Torah did I miss out on? Tell me what I missed. So Rav Nachman says back to Rav Huna, what we learned was Hamocher Sadel Isha Liishto Kansa, that if a man were to sell a field to his wife, she acquires it. And we don't assume that the sale was a ruse, that the husband was trying to recollect money that was skimmed off the top. Amar Le, Rav Huna says back to Rav Nachman, like, Okay, like it's nice, but it's not the most geschmack Torah in the world. Why not? Amar le pshita. That's pretty obvious. After all, dal zuze mehacha. If you remove all the financial components of the conversation, the tikni b'shtara. She has a star. What do you? This isn't about money. She has a star. So of course she should be able to be kona from her husband. After all, Milo Tznan, did we not learn halfway down on an Aleph Amid Aleph? Didn't we learn already Nechasim Sheish Samachrayas that when we're dealing with Nechasim that have liens on them, guarantees on them, namely karka, they are niknin bekesef ubishtar ubechazaka. This is not a chiddush. I don't understand it. You're right. I missed base medrash last night, says Rav Huna, but that Torah is not mechudash. So I don't understand what the problem is. So Amar Le, Rav Nachman says back to Rav Huna, Valav Itmar Allah Amar Shmuel. Didn't we learn already Lo Shanu, this idea about making a kinyan on karka with a star, El Bishtar Matana? That was only true in regards to a matana. There, when it comes to a matana, we assume that a woman can be kone. Aval b'shtar mecher, but when it comes to a shtar mecher, which is actually making a proper sale of a husband to a wife, lo kana ad sheyitain lo dameh, then a shtar is insufficient, and it would only be a kinyan if there was money. So no, you're not right. We can't ignore the money. It's not just about the shtar. When it comes to a woman, she can be kona from her husband with a matana, or she can be kona, a shtar, a regular mecher, provided that the money has changed hands, but a shtar is not enough. So it says the Gemara that the other person barks back and said, Valav Mosiv Rav Hamnuna. Wasn't this the question of Rav Hamnuna? What does this mean? So it says the Gemara, Bishtar Ketzad. How is it that one is kona with a shtar? Kosav lo al niyar o al hacheres. Let's say that the document is written on paper or it's written on pottery. And afal pisha ein bo shava pruta, and even if the value of that paper or pottery was not a shava pruta, and if what it says is sadi mechura lach or sadi knuya lach, harezem mechura unasuna, that is considered to be an appropriate sale. What does that show us? That a shtar is sufficient without cash. Even just the sadi mechurlach, just the fact that you wrote it down on the paper or on the pottery. So you can't tell me that we're talking about that the money has to be there, like Shmuel says. Shmuel's against the brisa. So says the Gemara, "V'lavhu mosiv lavhu mefarik la." No, not only did he ask the question, he answered it also. That what are we talking about? Where you only need a shtar. The Gemara says you only need a shtar b'mocher sadeu mipnei ra'asa. That when I'm selling you a field, it's a low quality field. I'm selling it at 60 cents on the dollar. I just want to offload this piece of property. In that case, we say the shtar is sufficient. That's fine, no problem. But when we're doing a regular sale, then the shtar is not sufficient. We also need money. That's what the Gemara says over here. Skip the parentheses. For Rav Ashi Amar, we're really talking about b'matana b'kesh lit nalo. We're talking about only when it was given as a gift. The lama kasav labalashin mecher. Why was it written with the language of mecher? Teliapos kocho. Because what that does is it enables a person who receives a gift that if the gift is taken by debtors, then you can recollect it. Meisvei, the Gemara says this is not so simple. Love min ha'eved v'shichriro. Let's say I borrowed money from my eved. I'm on desperate times here. I borrowed money from my eved, and then I freed him. Or min ha'isha v'girsha. Or I borrowed money from a wife and then divorced her. Ein lahen alav klum. There are no tainas at all. They cannot even recollect the money from their original Baal. My taima. Why not? Lav mishum de'amrinan legluye zuzi hu. Perhaps we could argue that the whole kinyan was based on the fact that maybe they were skimming and he wanted to recollect the money. Says the Gemara, no, that's bichlal not why, not at least in regards to the Eved or the Isha. Shani hasam delo nichale l'shavi enavshe Eved lo v'leish malve. Because whenever you borrow something, you become a little bit meshubad to the person you borrow from. If I were to go borrow money from someone who works in my house, I'm their employer. That's weird. And it creates a funky dynamic. This is actually a pasuk. We've seen this pasuk many times. It's a pasuk in Mishlei. Eved is a love leish malve, to the person. It's just not a good dynamic. So that's why that's the case. And we're about to see the same exact Gemara, almost a full repeat with different names because it happened more than one time in history. We're 2 lines from the bottom on an Aleph Amid Aleph. And the Gemara says, Shalach Rav Huna bar Avin, Hamocher Sadel Ishto Kansa, as we've learned already, that a person who sells a field to his wife, that kinyan counts. Top of Nun Aleph Amid Beis. Ubal Ochel Peros. In an interesting turn, if I sell my wife a field and she pays me for it, I still get the peros. not dissimilar to nichse maluk, where if she owns something that she brings into the marriage, I still have the rights of the peros. All of that is shita number one. Biram, however, Rabbi Abba, Rabbi Abo, v'chol gedolei hador amru, they all said, b'matana bikesh litnola. That's not correct. We weren't talking about a mecher. When can she take ownership? That's only as a gift, but not as a sale. Why was it written in the language of mecher if it's only a matana? Because we wanted to protect her. K'dei says kocha. We wanted to strengthen her and the outcomes financially for her, in that even if I give it as a gift, if a debtor of mine comes to collect the gift that I gave her, she can come back to me for yet another field. Meisve, hold on 1 second, like we just saw at the bottom of Nun Aleph Amud Aleph. Love min ha'eved, lava min ha'eved, v'shicharo min ha'isha v'girsha ein lahem alav klum. That in all of these cases, we assume that it's not a good dynamic. My time, are we under the assumption that the reason why the borrower doesn't have to pay them back is because he thought these people were skimming, and he set up this whole ruse of a kinyan in order to recoup his losses? No, says the Gemara. Shiny awesome. The lo lishvi inish eved lo ishmal. No, that's not what's going on here. In the case of the Brisa, where it says lava mina eved v'shicharo, and in regards to the wife, the same thing. We said ein la love klum. That's simply because it's pasnished. If you're the Baal, it doesn't look good if you're borrowing from your eved. All right, let's dig into this same sugya, but in a little bit more of a psak-oriented kind of a way. This will take us toward the bottom of the page, 5 lines from the bottom, where we'll stop tonight. Amar Rab, 8 lines down, 9 lines down. Hamocher sadul ishto kansa v'habal ochel peros, like we saw earlier. Rab is of the opinion that if I sell a field to my wife, she acquires it. However, I, the husband, still have a right to peros, similar to nichse maluk. And the Gemara says, b'matana kansa ve'ein bal ochel peros. If it's a gift, it's mamish a full gift, and therefore the husband is not allowed to eat the peros. All of that is the shita of Rab. Rav says that by mecher, she acquires it and he gets peros. By matana, she acquires it and he doesn't get peros. Third of the way down, Rabbi Lazar Amar, echad zeh ve'echad zeh kansa ve'ein abal ochel peros. No, the sales are full and final. And even if it's a case of mecher, whereas Rav was of the opinion that the husband would be able to get peros, according to Rabbi Lazar, that's not true. Avad Rav Chizda uvda ke Rabbi Lazar. And Rav Chizda paskind like Rabbi Lazar, against Rav, which is very weird. And the Gemara calls this out. Amrule Rabban Ukva, the Rabban Nechemia, B'nei B'nasei de Rav, Rav Chizda. These are the grandchildren of Rav. They said to Rav Chizda, what's going on here? Rav, 2nd generation. Rav was 1st generation. Rav Yosef Rabbi Lazar was 3rd generation. So who was alive in the 3rd generation? Rav's grandkids. So Rav's grandkids said to Rav Chizda, I don't understand what you're talking about. How could you do that? Shavik mar Rav Reve, Avid Kizutre. Our Zaidi is Rav. How in the world could you paskin like anyone other than Rav? This wasn't because of familial connections. Rav was a Gavra Rabbah. Rebbe Lazar was a Gavra Rabbah at his door, but he I don't want to be rude, but he probably didn't hold the candle to Rav. We don't hold the candle to one word of his Torah, but I'm just saying relative to Rav, everybody held like Rav. So Amar Le, Rav Chizda responded to the grandchildren of Rav. Amar Le, I'm also holding like one of the big guns. Don't worry, Rebbe Lazar is one of the names, but he's not the only one who holds like me. After all, the Asa Ravin, Amar Reb Yochanan echad zeh ve'echad zeh kansa ben abal ochel peros. Oh, so now we see that there's a machlokes Rav and Reb Yochanan. Reb Chizda's opinion was manifest as though he held like Reb Lazar. Yes, Reb Lazar held that way, but that wasn't the reason he held that way. Reb Chizda held like Reb Lazar because of the sheet of Reb Yochanan. Amar Rava says hilchasa halacha lemaisa. How do we paskin in regards to this machlokas between Rav and Reb Chizda? He says that if a man sells a field to his wife, she does not acquire the bal ochel peros. This is a stira. Look at this. Rava says that if I sell a field to my wife, the transaction does not work. And the bal ochel peros. Very weird. The transaction doesn't work and the husband can eat the peros. but the matana, if I give it to her as a gift, kansa, she does acquire it. Ve'ena ba'al ochel peros. Says the Gemara, you're saying tarte, you're saying two opposite things. You just said Rava's line where it says Rava Hilchasa. He says that if I sell a field to my wife, she does not acquire it, and the husband gets to eat. Those are opposite things. If the husband's eating the peros, it must be because she owns it. Lokasha, and with this idea, we'll close. Kan b'mos timunin. Kan b'mos timunin. That's where she's hidden money. In one case where she hasn't hidden money. To Amar Rav Yehuda, mos timunin lo kansa. Where there is money that's hidden, she skimmed off the top. That's not considered a kinyan. She does not get to own the field, but he gets to collect peros because he needs to recollect his losses. And Moshe in timunin kansa. But if in fact the money was not hidden, namely she didn't skim off the top, then she does in fact fully acquire it, and that explains the contradiction within the opening line of Rabbah. We'll stop right here at the 2 dots. 5 lines from the bottom on Nun Aleph Amud Beis. We'll see you on Shabbos at 6:10 p.m. Wishing you all a beautiful night.